Hey, welcome to the channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. If you haven't been here before, my name is David, and I started out doing mostly travel and outdoor adventure videos, and then maybe the odd product review video, but it quickly became apparent that there was much more interest in my review content than my travel content. So while I do still occasionally produce outdoor adventure videos, you'll find that most of the videos I am producing right now are reviews on outdoor related products. So things like solar panels, battery systems, portable power stations, some DIY projects, and tips related to those things, and also the occasional e-bike because hey, why not? They're outdoor related and a heck of a lot of fun if you've never tried one. But moving on to the topic of this particular video, we're going to take a detailed look at this mid-range portable power station option from a company called Vigorpool. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I get multiple offers pretty much every day from companies wanting me to review their products on the channel, and I turn the vast majority of those down because either the product is just not a great fit for the channel, or maybe after carefully reviewing the specs, it's just not something I'm comfortable recommending. So that said, this particular power station had some very interesting capabilities that I thought might be worth checking into. So before we get into all those details and how it has performed for me over the past couple of months of use and testing, let's jump back into time and see what it comes with in the box. Kind of a user guide packet with stickers and warranty cards and all that stuff. All right, we have one car charger to Anderson connector input, and one really heavy-duty gauge computer-style AC cable. So fast charging, I'm guessing, is in store, and probably no charge brick. Wow, okay. So this thing has a unique form factor. So back here, so we have our AC adapters, and then we've got some kind of a connector here. I think it's a parallel port that enables you to connect two of these together. So you can double your capacity and double your output capability. So wireless charging on top. There's a light on this side, and there's the front. So it looks like there's a little plastic door on the bottom, a little lift up, and I'll do a close-up of this stuff so you can see. Let's try turning the thing on. Pretty nice multicolored display. Large digits for input and output. And in terms of DC ports, we've got kind of a standard couple of 18 watts Type A ports for USB, and then a couple of PD 100 watts for Type C. You've got, I believe these are 5521 accessory ports over here next to the accessory car socket. And it's got a little dust cover on it. I think that's about all I can get into right now. And we're going to talk the rest of the specs and the performance characteristics and all that as soon as we get back and run it through the paces. So let me jump forward in time and report back on how all that went. Okay, so let's quickly run through the important specs. The Captain 1200 has a 1,280 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery that's rated to maintain 80% or more of its original capacity, even after 3,500 full charge and discharge cycles. And that's fairly standard for lithium iron phosphate, but that should equate to a functional lifespan of at least 10 years and possibly a fair amount more than that, depending on how you use it. And in terms of outputs, it has a pure sine wave AC inverter that is rated for 1,200 watts of continuous output at 120 volts and a surge capacity of up to 2,400 watts. And we're going to be putting that to the test here in a bit. Now, as I mentioned previously, it does have 4 AC outlets on the back, and these are 20 amp outlets. And I did check the output, and as you can see here, I was getting a little over 119 volts, which is excellent. It's got 2 18-watt USB-A ports, and these output a combined 36 watts. So you're getting the full 18 watts from both ports, even when used at the same time. And the same goes for the 2 USB-C PD 100 ports, supporting a combined 200 watts, which is nice since a lot of power stations will actually split those power output limits across the ports. So when you're using 2 of them at the same time, you're only really getting half the power to each. Now, the 12-volt car socket is rated up to 10 amps and 120 watts max. And those 2 DC 5521 ports are rated for a maximum of 36 watts each, or a combined total of 72 watts. And it should be noted that the combined output from all 3 of those DC ports is capped at 120 watts. And finally, that wireless charging pad on top is rated for a max of 10 watts output, which is pretty typical. Now on the input side of things, this does support 800 watt AC fast charging. So you can fully charge this 1280 watt hour battery from 0 to 100% in just about 2 hours, which is maybe not the fastest AC charging I've seen, but in my opinion, 2 hours is extremely reasonable of a charge rate in most cases. And if for some reason you absolutely needed to do it, you could actually charge this thing even faster because it will allow you to charge simultaneously with AC and solar for a max combined input of 1200 watts. But keep in mind that charging at that rate does introduce a significant amount of stress on the battery cells. And if you do that often enough, you will in all likelihood shorten the long-term service life of the power station by doing that. So I'd recommend not doing that, even though you can. Now on the DC input side here on the this Anderson port connector, and that is used for both car and solar charging, you can input up to 400 watts of solar, and it does have an input range of 12 to 56 volts at up to 12 amps. So either a single 100 watt panel or maybe a couple of 200 watt panels in series would be a good matchup for this power station. And that would enable you to fully charge it in about 5.5 hours of good sun. But even just a single 200 watt solar panel would get this thing mostly fully charged in a single full day of good summer sun. So a couple of other important points to note. The Captain 1200 does have mobile app control, and we'll take a look at that in just a minute. It also does have UPS mode with a very fast 10 millisecond switchover, and it does have the ability to connect in parallel to another Captain 1200 unit, effectively doubling both your battery capacity and your AC inverter output capacity to a 2400 watt continuous. And as far as warranty goes, Vigorpool covers all of its products for 2 years, which is fairly standard in the industry. And then finally, something I haven't really talked about in previous videos, but going forward, definitely something I'm going to make a point of covering, and that is electrical certifications. This unit does have UL, CE, and ROSE electrical certifications, as well as a few others that I'll list on the screen for you. I think especially for products like this that have high capacity energy storage, you absolutely do want to make sure you're buying something that has the appropriate electrical certifications. And that's obviously not to suggest that certified products don't ever fail, but at least you can have some peace of mind that these products have undergone and passed some rigorous international testing standards. Okay, I think we've covered most of the important stuff, so let's jump into the testing and see if this Captain 1200 lives up to all of these claims. All right, I have fully topped off the Captain 1200 here. So we should be at 100% state of charge. Let's do a DC discharge test and find out what the usable capacity is on this power station through the DC ports. So let's see, let's go ahead and activate that. And I am already got it set to just under 10 amps. You can see we're pulling 12.3 volts, 12.2 volts. We're going to keep an eye on the state of charge, and when we get pretty low on the state of charge, we'll come back and check to see how we're doing on the voltage output, to see if this is a regulated output or not. So we'll check back and see. We are at 6% state of charge. And one thing that I do want to point out is if we look at the battery tester over here, you can see that we are still putting out 12.2 volts. So this is definitely a regulated 12 volt port. So that's very good. Right, does look like we're done. Completely dead. Let's see how we did. 1,110.83 watt hours. So we'll round that up to 1,111 watt hours. All right, now we're going to do a discharge capacity test through the AC inverter to find out how many watt hours we can get that way. So I've got my little 200 watt heater here, and since the AC plugs are in the back, I've got my little watt meter plugged into the back. Let me go ahead and plug in the heater. So we start logging the power used. Turn this thing on. Now I just finished topping this thing off at 100%. So let me go ahead and activate the AC ports. Should be back here. And as soon as that light comes on, there we go. Go ahead and flip my heater on, and we are going to let this thing run, and we'll find out how many watt hours we can get out of that AC inverter. So according to this, it's going to take somewhere around 5 hours. So we'll check back when it's done. Alright, so our AC discharge test has wrapped up. Let's see how we did. We got 1,050 watt hours. Okay, so I just plugged this thing back in to fully recharge it after running that AC discharge test, And admittedly, that 1050 watt hours was slightly lower than I expected, but this thing came right up at 5% as soon as I plugged in the grid power to recharge it. So it must be reserving 5% for some reason. So I'll have to dig into the manual and see if there's any information on why it's doing that and what that's for. Let's do some load testing on this Captain 1200. As the name would suggest, it does have a 1200 watt continuous output on the AC inverter. At least it's rated for that, so we're going to make sure it will actually do that. And we're going to make sure we can run it for a reasonable period of time. So I'm going to try to run it for at least 15 minutes at as close to that 1200 watt continuous as I can. Now the Captain 1200 does have a boost option. It's actually, I don't think it's even an option. I think it's enabled by default. And I'm not sure if I can turn it off yet. I have to figure out, the app doesn't show me how I can turn that off or access that function. Maybe there's a key combination or something like that. I'm going to have to contact Vigorpool to find out if that's the case or not. But what Boost is supposed to do, as I understand it, it's like a lot of other brands have this kind of technology in their AC inverter. It allows you to run past the rated 1200 watts and use devices that normally draw more than that, up to 1800 watts in this case. But it should throttle the power down. I think that's how this works. We're going to actually test it and find out. But let's start putting a load on this. And I'm going to see if I can get this up to just about 1200 watts, and then we're going to set the timer and let it run. All right, so let's start out low here. And by the way, I am also inputting solar here. So it'll be interesting to see if right now we're not seeing any input because we're at 100%. But I'm kind of curious if it'll start back feeding solar while we're outputting once we start depleting this state of charge. So right now we're pulling 660 watts. Let's add another 600 watts or so. See if we can get very close to that 1200. But we're going to go ahead and start the timer. And we're going to let this run for at least 15 minutes. All right, I let it run a little bit long, but clearly the power station is not going to shut down on us. Let me go ahead and stop the timer. I think we've proven that we're easily able to run at just a little over 1200 watts continuous. At some point, the solar input did come in, as you can see. I think it was around 90%. I had to go back and look at the time lapse. But when I hit around 90% state of charge, the solar did kick back in. Let's find out what happens if I just actually set up another 800 watts and this time let it run and see how it reacts. All right, so you saw it go up to momentarily about 1800 watts, and that is the max on this unit, and it did trip the overload protection, and it shut down. So let me go ahead and plug in a 200 watt mini heater. That way, I am not dramatically exceeding it, keeping it under that 1800 watts maximum. That's the plan anyway. So let me go ahead, we've got the AC inverter on. Let me go ahead and add some load. Should take us up to 12 something. Now let's add 200 more watts and see if this actually jumps up and stays up or not. This will actually add almost 300 watts and then it'll come back down. So we should see this probably drop back down in a second. So now we're back to the same as what it would be if I turn this off. So what's happening is, so this does work basically like the X-Boost from other brands. So what's happening is it is throttling down to make sure that we don't exceed for very long this 1200 and change worth of continuous draw. But that is something you need to be aware of. That is not suitable for devices with complex circuitry. Certainly fine for lights, certainly fine for space heaters, things with a simple resistive load, but you would not want to use this with a microwave, a desktop computer, or a television, something like that, where you are going to exceed that 1200 watts. Those devices are fine as long as you stay under 1200 watts, but you don't want to use them when you're going to exceed 1200 watts because that boost can wreak havoc on those devices. So just be aware of that. All right, let's take a look at the Vigorpool app. This is going to be on an Android system. So first let's just turn on the Captain 1200 here. And then we need to make sure that we have the IoT turned on. That turns on the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Now we're going to go ahead and launch the app on the phone. See, it comes right up. Now I do have to be logged in order to get to this point or to add a new device. So just be aware of that. That is a requirement. So let me go ahead and tap on that. And now you can see that I have got a variety of little tiles here to choose from. So I've got no inputs or outputs currently, and it does show me the interior temperature of the unit as 66 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's go ahead and turn on the AC inverter by tapping that little radio button there. And I'm not sure why it does ask me to be able to select 50 hertz or 60 hertz. That, I would say, is something that you do not want to change. So let's see if that comes on. Yeah, and you can see now that on the output side, we are pulling 1400 watts from an oil heater that I have here. And by the way, we are drawing basically maximum capacity on this AC inverter. Actually more than maximum, right? It's 1200 watt inverter. But notice how quiet this thing is. I mean, this thing is whisper quiet. The fans have not even kicked on. All right, let's just leave that running and see if the fans do kick on. All right, so we can enable the USB ports here by turning those on and off. Notice that the wireless charging is enabled by default. We could disable that if we don't want to accidentally be charging something wirelessly. And then we've got our 12 volt DC and car connectors here. We can turn that on independent as well. And then the really cool thing is we've got a flashlight connection here. And we can, as you can see, we have lights on both sides. So we can just light up the left side, which would be on the right side from the camera's perspective, or the right side, or we can do them both. And of course, you can make them a little brighter, you can make them flash, and you can do the SOS and all that kind of stuff. But I really like the fact that you have the flexibility of having two different lights. So that really helps you light up your living space when you're using this thing. All right, let's go ahead and click on the More Features tile. And you can see I've got a device timeout. So right now it's set to 3 hours. And by the way, I did test this on a 12 volt refrigerator with a very intermittent setting at 45 degrees in pretty cool environment. And so the compressor was not kicking on very much at all. And even on the 3 hour setting, it never shut off on me. So I think this thing is very tolerant of intermittent and very low power draws. But if for some reason you needed to shut that off and set that to never, you could certainly do that. Now you can also set the screen timeout. I actually like to set that something more like 3 minutes instead of 30 seconds. And then battery protect mode, that is the maximum state of charge that it will charge to. And be aware that that applies to solar charging as well. I found that out the hard way because I accidentally set it to 40%. And then when I went to solar charge, it wouldn't charge past 40% on the battery. And I was like, what is going on? And then I realized I had set that in the app. But where that is really nice is if you want to really prolong the life. Now, this is lithium iron phosphate chemistry, so it's already got like 3,500 full charge discharge cycles at 100% depth of discharge. But if you wanted to set this thing to like 80%, for example, you might actually get up to over 4,000 full charge and discharge cycles setting it like that. So it's one way that if you don't need full capacity, you could lower the stress on the cells and prolong its overall service life. Now, slow charge, this is another thing that hung me up when I first saw it. So by default, you can see here it's turned off. But if I were to turn slow charge on, that limits charging to just 200 watts. So even though I could hook up 400 watts of solar input on this, if I have it set to slow charge, it's going to cap it at 200 watts and it won't go any higher. So just be aware of that. If you are under a limited time schedule and you want the full amount of solar, you should probably set slow charge to off. And then brightness, of course, allows you to set the brightness of the display. Now, I can hear the fans kicking on. Let's listen to them for just a second. All right, so even at maximum draw, we are still only pulling about 44 decibels with that fan. So this ranks as one of the quietest power stations that I have tested to date. All right, so that is about it as far as the app goes. I think it's a nice app, maybe a couple tiny little quirks here and there, but it seems pretty well polished. And they've already updated it once or twice in the 5 to 6 weeks that I've been playing around with this. So they are actively coding and adding new stuff to this app. So very good job. All right, let's test the UPS mode capability on this power station. And if we take a zoom in here on the display, you can see right next to the output power, you can see the letters UPS there. So that tells me I am in UPS mode, and you need to be basically in like 99% to 100% state of charge and plugged into grid power in order to be in UPS mode. So we're going to find out if we can simulate a power outage by pulling the grid power from this, because what it should be doing right now is passing through grid power, because we are no longer inputting straight to the battery. We're just passing it through to my sacrificial laptop over here with the battery removed. Now, I usually test these UPS modes with this particular laptop because it tends to have a fairly low capacitance in the AC adapter, meaning that it is relatively sensitive to just very small disruptions in power supply. So it will reboot if the UPS does not function fast enough. So we're going to find out if it works. So let's pull the grid power from here, and we'll see if we get any reboot from the laptop. All right, all I heard were the fans go off. The fans stopped running on the Captain 1200. Laptop still running just fine. And just to show you that there's no trickery, let me try to unplug and replug the power on this laptop in the back here. It's kind of a tight connection. I can't do it fast enough. See, my laptop shut down immediately. So, UPS mode on the Captain 1200 confirmed. All right, so as you saw, the Captain 1200 does indeed perform up to its specs. And now a couple of other tests that I did off camera include monitoring the AC inverter's no load draw. And in other words, if the AC inverter is left activated or turned on, how much power does it draw if there's no load on it? And the AC inverter on this unit does consume about 1.7% of the battery's capacity per hour. And that is a little on the high side, not alarmingly so, but a little on the high side. So it's kind of handy that the mobile app does give you the ability to set an auto shutoff for that AC inverter. Now, the price on the Captain 1200 is currently at $989 US. Plus, there's an additional 5% off discount code that they've provided me with, which combined with free shipping, I think is a pretty fair price, especially given the specs and the performance of this power station. And at that price, it's over $150 cheaper than something like the Jackery Explorer 1000 Pro, while still giving you 20% more battery capacity, 20% more inverter capacity, UPS mode, mobile app control, wireless charging. Oh, and let's not forget that it's using lithium iron phosphate, which gives it about 3.5 times the service life of the Jackery with its lithium NMC chemistry. So to wrap up, I think the Vigorpool Captain 1200 is actually a very solid mid-range power station, and I think it's definitely worth consideration if you're in the market for something in that 1,000 watt plus capacity and inverter range. And this gives you plenty of inverter and battery capacity above that 1,000 watts with pretty much all of the features that you might want short of an expansion battery option. But that does seem like it would be something that would be very easy for them to add to the product line, since this thing does already have that parallel connector in the back. But I'm not sure if they're going to add that or not. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So anyway, as usual, you can find a link to this power station in the video description below if you want to go check that out. And so I think that about does it for this video. If there's anything that I missed, or you have any lingering questions, feel free to leave those in the comments below, and I'll try my best to respond. So thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.